The Velkari flagship, Eternal Dominion, had been running for 3 weeks now. Admiral Kethnar stood on the command deck, his 4 eyes blinking in exhaustion as he stared at the tactical display. The human ships were still there. They were always still there. "Status report," he croaked, his throat dry from too little sleep and too much stress. "The human fleet remains at pursuit distance, Admiral," his tactical officer replied. 12 vessels, same as yesterday, same as the day before." Kethnar's claws scraped against the metal railing. The humans were not faster than his fleet. They were not more numerous. Their weapons were not superior, but they would not stop. They simply would not stop. It had started as a simple raiding mission. The Velkari Imperium had grown fat on conquest for 3,000 years. When humanity had joined the galactic community just 50 years ago, they had seemed like easy prey. A young species with limited territory, primitive technology, and no experience in interstellar warfare. The Imperium had decided to test them, to see if they were worth conquering or simply worth ignoring. Admiral Kethnar had led 50 warships into human space. They had struck a colony world called New Brisbane, destroying the orbital defense platforms and bombarding 2 cities before the local fleet could respond. It was supposed to be a quick strike, a demonstration of Velkari power that would make the humans submit. Instead, the humans had done something no species in 3,000 years of Velkari conquest had ever done. They had followed. The first week had been almost amusing. A dozen human vessels, mostly frigates and destroyers with a single cruiser leading them, had appeared at the edge of sensor range shortly after the Velkari fleet had left human space. Kethnar had ordered his fleet to accelerate, confident that his superior engines would leave the primitives behind. But when they dropped out of FTL near a fuel depot in neutral space, the humans were there. Not ahead of them, not intercepting them, just behind them, waiting, watching. "They tracked our FTL signature," his science officer had explained. "Their sensors are not as advanced as ours, but they seem to have developed specialized equipment for following ion trails through subspace." Kethnar had ordered an attack then, sending 10 ships to destroy the human pursuers. The humans had simply retreated, jumping to FTL before the Velkari ships could reach weapons range. And then, hours later, they had reappeared. Same distance, same formation, same patient waiting. That was when Kethnar began to feel the first stirrings of unease. Now, 3 weeks later, that unease had grown into something close to fear. His fleet had shrunk from 50 ships to 32, not from combat. The humans had barely fired a shot, but ships had fallen behind with mechanical problems, their crews too exhausted to perform proper maintenance. Supply vessels had been forced to detach and seek friendly ports. 3 captains had simply given up, turning their ships toward neutral stations and surrendering to the first authorities they could find. And through it all, the humans followed. 12 ships that never seemed to tire, never seemed to need rest, never seemed to doubt that they would eventually catch their prey. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet." Kethnar's heart sank. In 3 weeks, the humans had not attempted to communicate. This was something new, and new things had stopped being good a long time ago. "Display it." The holographic projector flickered and a human face appeared. It was a female, Kethnar thought, though he still had difficulty telling human genders apart. She wore a simple uniform, dark blue with silver insignia, and her expression was calm, almost friendly. "Admiral Kethnar," she said, "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Endurance *. I wanted to check in on you, see how you're holding up." The casual tone made Kethnar's scales itch. "What do you want, human?" "Just to talk. You've been running for a long time now. Your ships must be getting tired. Your crews must be getting scared." She smiled, and there was something predatory in it. "I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that eventually we'll have to stop, that we'll run out of fuel or supplies or patience. That's what everyone thinks." You cannot pursue us forever, Kethnar said, but even to his own ears his voice lacked conviction. Can't we? Captain Chen leaned forward. Admiral, do you know what persistence hunting is? Kethnar did not respond. It's an ancient human hunting technique, Chen continued. Our ancestors on Earth used to hunt animals that were faster than them. They couldn't outrun their prey in a sprint, but they didn't need to. They just followed. Hour after hour, day after day. The prey would run and they would walk. The prey would hide and they would find it. Eventually, the prey would collapse from exhaustion and the hunters would simply walk up and kill it. She paused, letting the words sink in. We evolved for this, Admiral. Our bodies are designed for endurance, for long-distance pursuit, for never giving up. And now we've brought that same instinct to space. Your ships are faster than ours in a sprint. Your weapons have longer range, but you can't rest. You can't repair. You can't resupply. And we can. Impossible, Kethnar said. You have been chasing us for 3 weeks. Your crews must be as exhausted as mine. Chen laughed. Admiral, we're running 3 shifts on every ship. While 1 crew works, 2 more sleep, eat, exercise, maintain their equipment. We've got supply ships meeting us every 4 days with fresh food, spare parts, even entertainment. My people are watching movies and playing games while they wait for you to wear yourself out. She held up a small device. I've got a book here that I've been meaning to finish. 800 pages. I started it when we began chasing you, and I'm about halfway through. I'm in no hurry, Admiral. I've got all the time in the universe. The transmission cut off, leaving Kethnar staring at empty air. Admiral, his executive officer said quietly, our engine coolant reserves are at 30%. We need to stop for maintenance within the next 40 hours, or we risk catastrophic failure. Kethnar closed all 4 eyes. In 3,000 years, the Velkari Imperium had never known defeat. They had crushed 100 species, conquered 1,000 worlds, built an empire that spanned half the galaxy. And now, 12 small human ships were doing what no army had ever done. They were wearing the Imperium down. Set course for the neutral zone trading post at Keth's Rest, he ordered. Maximum sustainable speed. We will resupply there. Admiral, the humans. I know, Kethnar's voice was tired. They will follow, they always follow. Behind them, at the edge of sensor range, the 12 human ships adjusted their course to match. They were not in any hurry. They had learned long ago that patience was the deadliest weapon of all. Captain Sarah Chen set down the communicator and stretched her arms above her head. The bridge of the Asterisk Endurance was quiet. Most of the current shift focused on their stations with the calm efficiency of professionals who knew their jobs well. Think he bought it, Captain? Her first officer, Commander David Okonkwo, asked. Bought what? Everything I said was true. The part about not being in a hurry. The part about having all the time in the universe. Chen smiled. That part was also true. I do have all the time in the universe. It's just that I'd prefer to end this sooner rather than later. She glanced at the tactical display. How are our ships holding up? Better than theirs, Okonkwo said. The Perseverance had some issues with their water recycler, but they got it fixed. Marathon is reporting somewhere on their FTL coils, but nothing critical. We're in good shape. And the resupply. Provisions will rendezvous with us in 18 hours. Fresh fruit, replacement filters, and about 600 hours of new entertainment content. Morale is going to spike. Chen nodded. When Command had given her this mission, she had known it would be a test of endurance rather than firepower. The Velkari had attacked New Brisbane and killed 8,000 people. Earth wanted revenge, but more than that, Earth wanted to send a message. A message that would echo through the entire galaxy. You can run, you can hide, but we will find you, and we will never ever stop. Their fleet has lost 18 ships in 3 weeks, she said, studying the display. No combat, just attrition. Mechanical failures, crew breakdowns, desertions. At this rate, they'll be down to a skeleton force within another month. And then we end it. Chen's voice was soft, but there was steel beneath the words. They killed 8,000 of our people. They thought we were weak because we were young. They're going to learn what humans do to those who mistake kindness for weakness. The bridge crew continued their work in silence. Behind them, the stars wheeled slowly past the viewports. Ahead, the Velkari fleet fled toward a rest that would never come. And the humans followed. The news of the pursuit spread through the galaxy like wildfire through dry grass. In the halls of the Galactic Council, diplomats whispered about the strange new species that hunted its enemies across the stars. In the trading posts and space stations of the neutral zone, merchants shared stories of Velkari ships limping into port, their crews hollow-eyed and jumping at shadows. Ambassador Zethki of the Tholian Collective received the reports with growing concern. Her species had been observing humanity since their first tentative steps into interstellar space, and she had always counseled caution. Now, watching the Velkari Imperium slowly disintegrate under human pursuit, she began to wonder if caution had been insufficient. They don't fight like any species we've encountered, she told the council, her voice resonating through the great chamber. They don't seek decisive battles. They don't try to destroy their enemies in single engagements. They simply follow. They follow until their enemy can no longer run. This is barbaric, the Velkari ambassador protested. It is torture, psychological warfare of the worst kind. The council must intervene. You attacked their colony, Ambassador Zethki replied coolly. You killed 8,000 of their civilians. Did you expect no response? We expected a proper response. A fleet engagement, a negotiated settlement, perhaps some territorial concessions. This endless hunting is not civilized warfare. Perhaps, Zethki said, that is precisely the point. She turned to address the full council. I have studied human history extensively. They are a species that evolved as pursuit predators on their homeworld. They did not have the claws of the Velkari, the speed of the Thuron, or the armor of the Keth. They survived by being patient, by never giving up, by following their prey until it collapsed. She paused, letting her words sink in. They call it persistence hunting, and now they have adapted it to space warfare. They are not trying to destroy the Velkari fleet. They are trying to break it, to demonstrate to the entire galaxy that attacking humanity comes with a cost that cannot be measured in ships or territory. What cost? Another ambassador asked. The cost of never being safe again. The cost of knowing that no matter how far you run, no matter how fast you flee, the humans will follow. They will follow until you surrender, until you collapse, until you beg for mercy. And even then, Zethki's voice dropped, even then they may not stop. The council chamber fell silent. In the vastness of space, 12 human ships continued their patient pursuit, and the galaxy began to understand that a new kind of predator had arrived among the stars. Admiral Kethnar had not slept in 4 days. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the human ships on his tactical display. Every time he tried to rest, he imagined them drawing closer, their patient presence a weight on his mind that he could not escape. His fleet had reached Keth's Rest, the neutral trading station, but there was no rest to be found there. The humans had followed them to the edge of the station's territory and simply waited, their ships visible on long-range sensors like wolves circling a wounded animal. We cannot stay here forever, his executive officer said. The station master has already expressed concern about our presence. Other species are afraid to approach with the humans so close. They will not attack a neutral station, Kethnar said, though he was no longer certain of anything. They don't need to attack, they just need to wait. Kethnar stared at the tactical display. His fleet was down to 28 ships now. 4 more had been left behind at the station, their crews refusing to continue. The captains had claimed mechanical problems, but Kethnar knew the truth. They were afraid. They were all afraid. "We should negotiate," his executive officer said quietly. "The Imperium does not negotiate with lesser species." "Admiral, with respect, perhaps it is time to reconsider what lesser means." Kethnar's claws clenched, but he did not respond, because deep down, in the part of his mind that he tried not to acknowledge, he was beginning to wonder the same thing. The resupply ship provisions had brought more than just food and spare parts. It had also brought updated orders from Earth Command, and Captain Chen read them with grim satisfaction. "They're authorizing Phase 2, she told Commander Okonkwo. "The Council has refused to intervene, and the Velkari ambassador has been recalled to their homeworld. Command believes the time is right to increase pressure." "What does Phase 2 involve?" Chen smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. "We stopped letting them rest." The Velkari fleet departed Keth's rest after 6 days, their repairs incomplete but their supplies restocked. Admiral Kethnar had hoped that the pause would give his crews time to recover, but instead, it had only made things worse. The knowledge that the humans were waiting just outside the station's territory had hung over everyone like a storm cloud, preventing any real rest. And now, as they fled toward Imperium space, the humans were doing something new. "Admiral, the human fleet is splitting up." Kethnar turned to the tactical display, his heart's racing. The 12 human ships were dividing into 3 groups of 4, spreading out to cover a wider area behind the Velkari fleet. "What are they doing?" "Unknown, Admiral, but—" The tactical officer hesitated. "They appear to be positioning themselves to prevent us from changing course." "They're hurting us," Kethnar realized, "like animals." For the first time in his long career, Admiral Kethnar felt truly afraid. Not of the human weapons, not of their ships, but of their patience. Their terrible, inhuman patience. They were not just hunting the Velkari fleet anymore. They were guiding it, pushing it towards some destination that only they knew. And there was nothing Kethnar could do but run. The pursuit entered its 4th week, and the galaxy watched in horrified fascination as the mighty Velkari Imperium was slowly, methodically broken. Human news networks broadcast the chase in real time, with expert commentators explaining persistence hunting to audiences who had never heard of such a concept. The images became iconic. The Velkari flagship fleeing through the stars, the human vessels following like ghosts, never closing the distance but never falling behind. On 100 worlds, species that had been conquered by the Velkari began to whisper about rebellion. If the Imperium could be humbled by a dozen ships from a species that had only discovered FTL travel 50 years ago, perhaps they were not as invincible as they claimed. On Earth, the mood was complex. There was pride in the Navy's performance, satisfaction that the attack on New Brisbane was being answered. But there was also something darker, a primal recognition that the chase awakened ancient instincts that humanity had thought long buried. "We are what we are," Admiral James Morrison, commander of Earth's fleets, said in a press conference. "Our ancestors survived by being persistent, by never giving up, by following their prey to the ends of the earth. Now we follow our enemies to the ends of the universe. The message is simple: don't attack us, because if you do, we will come for you, and we will never stop." The galaxy listened, and the galaxy began to be afraid. Not of human weapons, not of human ships, but of human patience. Because weapons could be countered, ships could be destroyed, but patience was something else entirely. Patience was the slow death that no armor could stop, no technology could prevent, no strategy could defeat. Patience was the hunter's ultimate weapon, and humanity had brought it to the stars. Captain Chen stood on the observation deck of the Endurance Asterisk, watching the stars wheel slowly past. In the distance, so far away that it was barely visible even to enhanced sensors, the Velkari fleet continued its desperate flight. "You know," she said to Commander Okonkwo, who had joined her, My grandmother used to tell me stories about the persistence hunts. Not space hunts, the original ones. Back on Earth, before agriculture, before civilization. What were they like? Patient, terrifyingly patient. Chen's eyes remained fixed on the stars. The hunters would select an animal, a deer or antelope, and they would follow it. Not run after it, just follow, walk after it. The animal would sprint away, hide, rest. And the hunters would just walk up to where it was hiding, again and again, until the animal was too exhausted to run anymore. Sounds cruel. It was survival. Chen turned to face her first officer. And now it's survival again. The Velkari thought they could raid our colonies with impunity. They thought we were too young, too weak, too naive to respond. They needed to learn otherwise. And after this, when they've learned. Chen was silent for a long moment. That depends on them, she finally said. We can keep doing this forever. We evolved for it, but we'd rather not. We'd rather live in peace, trade, explore, build something better than an empire of fear. She looked back at the stars. But if they make us chase them, we will. Until the end of time, if necessary. Because that's what we are. That's what we've always been. Behind them, the Velkari fleet fled through the darkness. Ahead, the human ships followed, patient and eternal, the galaxy's newest and perhaps most terrifying predators. And in the great halls of power across 1,000 worlds, leaders and admirals and emperors looked at the news feeds and felt a chill run through them. Because they understood, finally, what humanity truly was. Not conquerors, not warriors, not even heroes. Hunters, the most patient hunters the universe had ever seen. Week 5 of the pursuit began with a development that sent shockwaves through the Velkari fleet. 3 more human ships had joined Captain Chen's squadron, bringing the total to 15. But that wasn't what terrified Admiral Kethnar. What terrified him was where they had come from. They were waiting for us, his tactical officer reported, voice trembling. At the Corvan Junction, they knew we would pass through there. They knew our course before we did. Kethnar stared at the display. The Corvan Junction was deep in neutral space, far from any human territory. The humans had no bases there, no supply lines, no reason to be there at all. Except that they had known. Somehow, impossibly, they had known. They're thinking ahead, his executive officer said quietly. They're not just following us anymore. They're predicting where we'll go and positioning ships to intercept. That's impossible. How could they know? Because they understand us, Admiral. The executive officer's voice was hollow. They've been watching us for 5 weeks. They know how we think, how we react, where we run when we're scared. They've turned our own instincts into a weapon against us. Kethnar felt something break inside him. Some final reserve of hope that he hadn't known he was holding onto. How many ships do we have left? 22, Admiral. Combat capable 17. 22 ships out of 50, and they hadn't fought a single battle, hadn't fired a single shot in anger. They had simply been worn down, eroded like stone underwater. Admiral, the communications officer interrupted. We're receiving another transmission from the human fleet. Display it. Captain Chen's face appeared once more, and Kethnar was struck by how rested she looked. How calm. How utterly untroubled by weeks of pursuit. Admiral Kethnar, she said, I wanted to give you an update on our situation. We've received reinforcements, as you've probably noticed. 3 more ships from the Marathon Asterisk class. They're very comfortable vessels. Lots of recreational facilities. My crews have been rotating through them for rest and relaxation. She smiled. I finished my book, by the way. It was excellent. I've started another one. 850 pages this time. I'm hoping you'll give me enough time to finish it. What do you want? Kethnar demanded. The same thing I've wanted from the beginning. Justice for New Brisbane. Acknowledgement that attacking human colonies has consequences. Chen's smile faded. And honestly, Admiral, I want to go home. I have a family back on Earth. A husband, 2 kids. I'd like to see them again." "Then stop chasing us." "I can't do that. Not until you surrender. Not until your government apologizes and pays reparations for the 8,000 people you killed." Chen leaned forward. "But here's the thing, Admiral. I'm patient. I can wait. I've got supplies, reinforcements, and all the time in the universe. Can you say the same?" The transmission ended. Kethnar stood motionless for a long moment. Then, slowly, he turned to his executive officer. "Send a message to High Command," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell them we need to talk about surrender." The news that Admiral Kethnar had requested permission to surrender reached the Velkari Imperium's capital world like a physical blow. For 3,000 years, no Velkari fleet had ever surrendered. It was against their code, against their culture, against everything they believed about themselves. The High Council convened in emergency session, and the debate was fierce. "We must send reinforcements," one counselor demanded. "Show these humans that the Imperium will not be intimidated." "Send reinforcements where?" another replied. "They're not fighting a battle, they're not holding territory, they're just following. What do we reinforce against?" "We could ambush them, set a trap." "With what? Our fleet is already diminished. And even if we could destroy their pursuit squadron, what then? They would send another, and another. They have made it clear that they will not stop." The High Counselor listened to the arguments, his ancient face impassive. He had ruled the Imperium for 200 years, had overseen the conquest of a dozen worlds, had never known defeat. But he was also wise enough to recognize when the universe had changed. "Tell me," he said, silencing the chamber, "what do we know about these humans, beyond their patience?" The intelligence minister stepped forward. "They are a young species, High Counselor. They developed FTL travel only 50 of their years ago. Their military is small by our standards. Their technology is adequate but not exceptional. And yet they have done what no species in 3,000 years has accomplished." "Yes, High Counselor." "How?" The intelligence minister hesitated. "They appear to have a biological adaptation for extended pursuit. Their bodies can regulate heat more efficiently than most species, allowing them to maintain activity for long periods. More importantly, their psychology seems uniquely suited to this type of warfare. They do not become discouraged by setbacks. They do not lose focus. They simply continue." "Can this be countered?" "Unknown, High Counselor. Our models suggest that any counter-strategy would simply prolong the chase. The humans appear willing to pursue for months, even years if necessary." The High Counselor closed his eyes. "Years." "Yes, High Counselor. Their own records indicate that their ancestors would pursue prey for days at a time. They appear to have simply scaled this instinct upward." The debate raged for hours, but in the end, there was only one conclusion. The Imperium could not afford an endless war of attrition with a species that seemed designed for exactly that kind of conflict. "We will negotiate," the High Counselor finally announced. "We will offer reparations for the colony they call New Brisbane. We will apologize for the attack." "This is humiliation." "No." The High Counselor's voice was heavy with resignation. "This is survival. We have conquered 100 species because we were stronger, faster, more ruthless. But these humans, they are not stronger. They are not faster. They are simply more patient than we can ever be. And against patience there is no defense." The surrender came 6 weeks after the attack on New Brisbane. Admiral Kethnar stood on the bridge of the asterisk Eternal Dominion as his flagship slowed to a stop, finally ending its desperate flight across the stars. Around him, what remained of his fleet followed suit. 19 ships out of the 50 that had begun this campaign. Not destroyed in battle, but lost to exhaustion, to mechanical failure, to the slow erosion of will that the humans had inflicted so methodically. Captain Chen's ship, The Endurance Asterisk approached slowly, flanked by its squadron of patient hunters. They had never fired a shot in anger, never engaged in combat, never done anything except follow. And yet, they had achieved what no enemy fleet in 3,000 years had ever achieved. They had broken the Velkari Imperium's will to fight. "Captain Chen," Kethnar said when the communication channel opened, "I am prepared to discuss terms of surrender." "I'm glad to hear it, Admiral." Chen's voice was professional, almost kind. "My government has authorized me to accept your surrender on the following conditions: full reparations for the attack on New Brisbane, a public apology from your government, and a guarantee that no Velkari vessel will enter human space without permission." "And if we refuse?" Chen smiled. "Then we'll keep following you, forever if necessary, but I think we both know that won't be necessary." Kethnar closed his eyes. He thought of his fleet, reduced to half its strength without a single battle. He thought of his crews, exhausted beyond measure by weeks of endless pursuit. He thought of the Imperium, brought low not by superior firepower but by simple, relentless patience. "We accept your terms," he said. The words tasted like ash in his mouth, but as he spoke them he felt something else too: relief. The chase was over. The humans had won. And deep down, in a part of his mind he would never acknowledge publicly, Admiral Kethnar felt something close to respect. Because the humans had not beaten him through strength or speed or superior technology. They had beaten him by being exactly what they were: persistent hunters who refused to give up. It was, in its own terrible way, almost admirable. The treaty signing took place 1 week later, aboard a neutral station in the Corvan Junction. The galaxy watched as the Velkari Imperium, for the first time in its long history, formally apologized and paid reparations to a species it had attacked. The human delegation was led by Captain Sarah Chen, who had been promoted to Commodore for her successful pursuit. She accepted the surrender with grace and professionalism, offering no gloating, no triumphalism, only a quiet satisfaction that justice had been served. But it was what she said at the press conference afterward that echoed through the galaxy for years to come. "We did not win this conflict through superior technology," she said, facing the cameras with calm assurance. "We did not win through superior numbers or superior firepower. We won through patience, through persistence, through the simple refusal to give up." She paused, letting her words sink in. "On Earth, our ancestors survived by being the most persistent hunters on the planet. They could not outrun their prey, but they could outlast it. They could follow it until it collapsed. They could pursue it until it surrendered. Now we have brought that same persistence to the stars. Let this be a lesson to anyone who thinks about attacking humanity. We may not be the strongest species in the galaxy. We may not be the fastest or the most technologically advanced, but we are the most patient. And if you strike us, we will follow you. Across the galaxy, across the universe, across all of time if necessary. We will follow you until you surrender, because that is what we are. That is what we have always been. We are humanity, and we never ever give up." The words spread across the galaxy, transmitted from station to station, world to world. And as they spread, the galaxy began to change. On worlds that had been conquered by the Velkari, whispers of rebellion grew into shouts. If the mighty Imperium could be humbled by human patience, then perhaps the time had come to reclaim their freedom. On worlds that had been considering aggression against humanity, plans were quietly shelved. The risk was simply too great. No one wanted to be the next species chased across the stars. And on Earth, humanity celebrated not with triumphant parades or martial displays, but with quiet satisfaction. They had proven something important to the galaxy. They had proven what they truly were. The Velkari-human conflict, as it came to be known, changed the galaxy forever. Not because of the territory exchanged or the reparations paid, but because of the precedent it set. Species that had considered humanity a minor power, barely worth noticing, began to reconsider. Empires that had planned to expand into human space quietly shelved those plans. Civilizations that had looked down on the young species with contempt began to look at them with respect and fear, because the galaxy had learned something important about humanity. They had learned that humans did not fight like other species. They did not seek decisive battles or glorious victories. They fought like what they were: persistent predators, the most patient hunters the universe had ever seen. In the centuries that followed, humanity expanded across the stars, not through conquest but through patience. They made friends slowly, building trust over generations. They made enemies rarely, preferring to negotiate and compromise. But when they were attacked, when their people were hurt, when justice was required, they followed. They followed until their enemies surrendered, until their enemies apologized, until their enemies learned that attacking humanity was not just dangerous but pointless. Because you could not defeat patience. You could not outrun persistence. You could not hide from a species that would simply never, ever stop. The galaxy learned this lesson well. And in the great halls of power across 1,000 worlds, a new proverb emerged, passed from species to species, from generation to generation. Never run from a human. They were born for the chase. Commodore Sarah Chen retired from active service 15 years after the Valkyrie conflict. She returned to Earth, to her family, to the quiet life she had always wanted. But sometimes, on clear nights, she would go outside and look up at the stars. And she would think about the chase, about the weeks of patient pursuit, about the moment when the Valkyrie fleet finally stopped running. Her grandchildren would find her there sometimes, and they would ask her to tell the story again. The story of how 12 small ships had broken an empire without firing a shot. The story of how patience had defeated power. And she would smile and tell them the truth. "We didn't do anything special," she would say. "We just did what humans have always done. We followed, we waited, we refused to give up." And in the end, that was enough. It was always enough. Above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy that had learned to respect humanity. Not for their weapons, not for their ships, not for their technology, but for their patience. The most human quality of all. Deep in the archives of the Galactic Council, a document exists that is required reading for any species that wishes to understand humanity. It is simply titled, "The Nature of Human Warfare," and it was written by Ambassador Zethke of the Tholian Collective, who witnessed the Valkyrie conflict firsthand. The document is long and detailed, covering everything from human biology to human psychology to human military doctrine. But it is the final paragraph that is most often quoted, most often remembered. In all my years of studying the species of this galaxy, I have never encountered anything quite like humanity. They are not the strongest, not the fastest, not the most intelligent, but they possess a quality that no other species shares. They do not know how to give up. It is not stubbornness, not pride, not even courage. It is simply their nature. They are persistent predators, evolved over millions of years to follow their prey until it collapses. They have brought this instinct to the stars, and they have made it the foundation of their civilization. My advice to any species considering conflict with humanity is simple: don't. Because you cannot defeat a species that refuses to accept defeat. You cannot outlast a species that was born to outlast. You cannot run from a species that was designed to follow. They will chase you across the galaxy. They will chase you across time itself. And in the end, they will win. Not through superior force, but through simple, endless, unstoppable patience. That is the nature of humanity. That is why they are to be respected, to be admired, and above all, to be feared. Because they never, ever stop. The galaxy continued to turn, stars being born and dying, civilizations rising and falling, the endless dance of cosmic history playing out across the vastness of space. And through it all, humanity persisted. They made allies. They made friends. They built a civilization that stretched across 1,000 worlds, not through conquest but through patience, through the slow accumulation of trust and respect that only time can build. But they never forgot the lesson of the Velkhari conflict. They never forgot what they truly were. Persistence predators, patience hunters, the species that would not stop. And somewhere, in the great records of galactic history, Entry 185 stands as eternal testament to a simple truth. Humanity showed the galaxy that persistence hunting works in space warfare too. And the galaxy was never the same again. Years later, when historians looked back on the conflict, they would note something remarkable. The entire campaign had been fought without a single casualty on either side. No shots fired in anger, no ships destroyed in combat, no lives lost to violence. It was the most bloodless victory in galactic history, and somehow that made it even more terrifying. Because the galaxy understood something profound. Humanity had won not by being violent, but by being patient. They had demonstrated a form of power that was completely alien to most species, the power of endurance. They didn't need to kill us, Admiral Kethnar told a historian years later, after he had retired from service and the wounds of defeat had begun to heal. They just needed to outlast us, and that, I think, is the most frightening thing about them. They can wait forever. He paused, his 4 eyes distant with memory. When I was young, I was taught that strength was the ultimate virtue, that the strong conquered the weak, and that was the natural order of the universe. The humans taught me that there is something stronger than strength. What is that? Kethnar's scales rippled in what might have been a smile. Patience, simple, endless, unstoppable patience. They never attacked us, never threatened us, never even raised their voices. They just followed, and in the end, that was enough. He looked up at the stars, visible through the window of his modest retirement home. I have learned to respect them, not fear them, respect them, because they showed me something I had never understood before, that true strength is not about destroying your enemies. It is about outlasting them. The humans did not conquer the Velkhari Imperium. They simply made us understand that some battles cannot be won, not through force, not through speed, not through any weapon ever devised. Some battles can only be won by those patient enough to wait. And so the story of the Great Chase passed into legend, becoming one of the defining moments in galactic history. Schools across 1,000 worlds taught it as a case study in asymmetric warfare. Military academies analyzed it for tactical insights. Philosophers debated its implications for the nature of conflict. But for humanity, the lesson was simpler. The lesson was something their ancestors had known for millions of years, something encoded in their very DNA. Never give up, never stop, never let your prey escape. And the galaxy learned, once and for all, that humanity was not to be underestimated, not because of their technology or their weapons or their ships, but because of who they were. Persistence predators, the hunters who would not stop. The species that showed the galaxy that patience was the deadliest weapon of all.